Today is June 19th, also known as Juneteenth. It's a day in our American history in which we celebrate the day that in 1865 the final slaves were freed. Now, a little bit of the history, it actually officially happened a couple years earlier with the Emancipation Proclamation that Abraham Lincoln signed as an executive order. But of course the states of the Confederacy did not see that as a valid order, and so it took until the end of the war to really enact that. And then even then the slaveholders did not inform the slaves that this was the case, and so it took the Union generals going to the slaves and personally telling them, you are now free, you are now free women and men. And so in Galveston, Texas, on this date in 1865, the final slaves were informed that indeed they were free. But I think it's a powerful reminder, right, that it took all of this time, that this official thing happened, but then it took years before freedom actually took place. And historians will tell us that it's taken a lot longer than that, and freedom is still not actually taken place for African Americans who were brought to this country as slaves. Think about ways that freedom is still limited and has been for generations. Jim Crow laws, redlining, the celebration of the Confederacy that continues in some parts of the South. Just ways that black brothers and sisters continue to be targeted in so many ways. I just watched a video actually yesterday by Phil Vischer, who is one of the creators of VeggieTales, and he talks about some of these things. He really has a great way of explaining in simple terms some of the realities of racism in our culture. It's a little not what I expected from the voice of Bob the Tomato, but incredibly good information and helpful information. I'll put a link to it to this video. But here in Lawrence we can say, well, that happens down in the South, right? That's where racism exists, right? Jim Crow, all those things, but it doesn't happen here, right? It doesn't happen here in enlightened Lawrence, right? I'm standing here just off of 6th Street. Florida is over here, and Michigan is over here, and I'm standing on the site of what used to be the Jayhawk Plunge. Jayhawk Plunge was a swimming pool, a big pool that was a place where people could come down 6th Street and turn down what was then a dirt road and come into the pool and pay a quarter, and they could enjoy a little bit of cool water on a hot June day. They could come together with their families and enjoy that kind of experience as long as they were white. You see, the Jayhawk Plunge was not a public pool, but it was a private facility, and the owners of that facility believed that black people should not intermingle with whites in the pool. And so there was this culture set up in which whites could come and they could enjoy this experience, but what was the owners said? That they said, well, we're socially selective and friendly, which meant no blacks allowed. What that meant was that families would come and they would enjoy the pool, whereas the black children would stand just outside the chain link fence and watch and wish that they could come in too. Langston Hughes, who grew up here in Lawrence, talks about the experience of being a black child in his autobiography in Lawrence, saying how hard it was when your buddies could go to the pool and you couldn't. Rusty Mulholland writes about Ray Jones. Ray Jones was a young black boy that was one of those boys that stood and watched the other kids play in the pool, and because he couldn't go himself, went just a few blocks away to the Kansas River and thought, well, I'll just swim here, until the current caught him and pulled him under, and he died. White families enjoying the nice, cool water on a summer day. Black children dying just blocks away. It's kind of a reminder on this Juneteenth that it takes a while for freedom to become a reality. Understanding that not everybody can be free in the same way. And so Here in Enlightened Lawrence even, we fight these same battles, we have these same struggles, we have these same realities that we look at. And it's a reminder that, see, all of those white families, they weren't racist, right? Not in the way that we talk about KKK members and skinheads and neo-Nazis, right? They weren't screaming like the people at Charlottesville did a couple of years ago, right? They weren't racist in that way, but racism is something more than that. Racism is participating in and even kind of being blessed by these racist systems, these broken systems that make some people more free than others. And so those families, the high schoolers who were lifeguards, even those that stood by and watched, voters who decided, well, we don't need a public pool because we already have one. These were the kind of folks that were not evil racists in the way that we sometimes think of them, but yet they participated in this system of racism. That's what racism is also about. It's the violence against people of color, but it's also the participation of people who are benefiting from those systems. And so we turn in our scriptures and ask, what does the Bible say about this? I thought this week about the reality of John 4. In John 4, Jesus kind of crashes through a lot of these systems, crashes through a lot of these barriers. It's a hot day, and he wants a little bit of water, and so he asks a woman at the well where he is sitting for a little bit of water. And of course, as he does that, he crashes through all of these systems. This is a woman that he's not supposed to be talking to. Not only that, but she is a Samaritan, somebody who's a part of a different culture, a different racial background. All of these things mean that they should not even be talking to each other. They shouldn't even notice each other, just like the white families not even noticing the children outside the chain link fence. They shouldn't even be in the same realm together according to the culture of that day, and yet Jesus crashed through that brokenness, said he wanted to give her something. Indeed, he offered her living water like what was once on this spot, refreshing, life-giving, living water. He offered her that, crashing through those systems. And aren't we still, as Christians, invited to do the same thing? Aren't we still invited to offer the living water of Christ to those regardless of their race, to crash through the systems of brokenness, of racism, the systems that separate us and tell us that some people are more free than others? I invite you to continue to ask that question. How might we together lament? How might we together confess? How might we together act? The spiritual leadership team has started to ask that question. How as a congregation we might do some of these things. Here on Juneteenth, here on this day, we ask ourselves again, how can we proclaim that all of God's children